Hi there, this is Solitaire Ronin from Solitaire Ronin Films, and welcome to another random review. And today's random review comes from 1982. It's a film directed by Robert M. Young, starring Edward James Olmos, and it's the Ballad of Gregorio, Cortez. This is an example of why I love cinema and films, because the next film that you watch could end up being one of your favourite films of all time. I am recently doing a series on the alphabet and going through my favourite films depending on what letter. Also, this wasn't in the B letters, but it will be when I make my final favourites list, because this film is one of those films that has instantly become one of my favourite films of all time, because it's a straight up masterpiece, and it blew me away the same way that Victor Stromstrom's The Phantom Carriage and Denis Villeneuve's Incendies did. It just absolutely blew me away. And again, it's why I love cinema. I mean, some film buffs kind of don't want to watch anything they haven't heard of, but that's pretty close-minded. That's why I keep buying films, especially from Criterion, that you've never heard of, or Powerhouse Indicator, or Eureka, or any of these boutique physical media labels, because again, the next one that you watch might end up being one of your favourites. And this is just an astonishing film. This is Criterion Spine number 940. It's a Region A Blu-ray. It's a 2K restoration, because even though the film was made in 1982, it actually had to go through a restoration in 2016. It's a new interview with actor and producer, and he also co-wrote the music, Edward James Olmos, which is fantastic. There's a new interview with Choni Noriega, author of Shot in America, Television, The State and the Rise of Chicano Cinema. And there's also a cast and crew panel from 2016. And there's also an essay in the booklet. This is a film that was made for $1 million, but it's absolutely beautifully shot. The sunsets, the night scenes, fire, it does have that kind of... It's set in 1901, and it's got the look of kind of old photographs. It's kind of got that same kind of cinematography as Haxel Wexler did in John Sayles' Matewan. I'm sure this is a film John Sayles must like, for reasons I'll go into. It's based on a true story about Gregorio Cortez, who at the time led to the biggest manhunt in the state of Texas. It was like over 600 Texas Rangers involved, who then went on pretty much a rampage, torturing or killing any Mexican they happened to meet. It's the story of Gregorio Cortez, strangely enough, who is accused of stealing a horse, and because of the difficulty in translations between Spanish and English, there's a misunderstanding. His brother is shot, he shoots a sheriff, and in the ensuing melee and chase, 2 other lawmen are killed. So the film is a fairly simple setup. It's a chase film. We've all seen hundreds of westerns like that before, but in the same kind of style as Rashomon. The stories change. We see the event from different perspectives. Like I said, it's directed by Robert M. Young, who I'm not really that familiar with. He did a lot of documentaries, a lot of TV movies. He's still alive. He directed 5 episodes of the new version of Battlestar Galactica. But it's shot really like a documentary. There's a realism to it, even though there's a kind of poetic realism to it. But there's a realism, there's lots of kind of handheld camera work. It's really earthy. It's really immediate and visceral. It's just so good. It stars a lot of character actors that you perhaps don't recognise their names. From Brian James, who you'll obviously recognise probably the most from Blade Runner and playing lots of heavies. Bruce McGill, Tom Bower, Ned Beatty appears for like 2 minutes at the end of the film, brandishing a shotgun. James Gammon, who this is perhaps his best performance. He's just fantastic in it. So there's lots of these kind of world-weary character actors that you'll recognise their faces, if not their names. I had to kind of double check their names myself. Edward James Olmos gives a great performance, despite the fact he doesn't speak that much. He talks a lot to his horses. He pretty much speaks exclusively in Spanish. So there's a definite choice not to have subtitles, because there is lots of Spanish spoken. And obviously if you understand Spanish, then the whole film is a kind of different viewing experience, because the shootings were essentially over the misunderstanding or mistranslation of a word, which led to these tragic events. But obviously if you speak Spanish, you'll kind of know as you're watching the scene unfold that this could end up being bad. But if you're like me, who sadly does not speak Spanish, you understand kind of from the English speaking character's point of view the confusion between language. It's about the need for communication. So Edward James Olmos just gives a wonderful performance in the end. It's actually profoundly moving. It's a profoundly moving film. So once he's captured, because he learns that his wife and kids are in prison, his brother has eventually died, so he gives himself up, and then it becomes, well, a very short kind of courtroom drama. His lawyer is played by, I can't remember his name, but the guy who played Maurice and from Northern Exposure. He gives a very good performance as well. The acting in this film is just spot on. William Sanderson turns up as just a kind of lonely cowboy who Edward James almost comes across and kind of shares a campfire meal and a night's rest. And he gives a wonderful turn, and he's only in it for 5 minutes. Again, it was only made for $1 million, and it just looks stunning. It's beautifully acted. The actual courtroom sequences is pretty much based on real transcriptions from the actual case. It was the first case in America, I believe, that an interpreter was used, usually in courts for immigrants who spoke Italian only or French only or whatever, or Spanish only. It was just tried in English and that was it. Whereas the judge in this case deemed it important enough to actually use an interpreter, and that was the first time in American history. It's an important film as far as Latino history, as far as Latino film culture, because obviously a lot of westerns and American films, Mexican characters were pretty much just bandits. They were lucky if they had 2 dimensions, let alone 3 dimensions. Their characters were very kind of stereotypical, and a lot of the time they weren't even played by Latino actors. So this was kind of a groundbreaking film, even though it was still in 1982, but it was still groundbreaking by that time, because films like that with a Latino quote-unquote hero in the role just hadn't been seen. The actual story was originally from a book called With His Pistol in His Hand, and essentially the Ballad of Gregorio Cortez had become, there's folk songs about his story, and that's kind of where the ballad comes from, because it's pretty much Mexican folk songs about his story. Like I said, there's elements of Rashomon in it as far as shown as the same event but just from different perspectives, and obviously people tend to lie or fudge the story to make themselves look better. I would say it's probably an influence on the Tommy Lee Jones film Three Burials of Miquelas Estrada, which is a wonderful film in itself, directed by Tommy Lee Jones. I'm assuming he must have seen the Gregorio Cortez film. It's also about myth making and storytelling and kind of infamous celebrity. When Cortez is brought into the town to face trial, obviously there's lots of hangers on and lots of crowds gather to see the guy who killed 2 sheriffs allegedly. We do kind of get a sobering screed at the end of the film, which I won't spoil. And as far as what happens to him, all I'll say is it is Texas after all. Again, it's a film that personally, for me, I found quite moving in the end. Again, it's a film that kind of made me thank cinema, because again, it is one of those films that ends up being a surprising experience and quite a magnificent experience, and that's why you should keep buying films you've never heard of, because the next one could be as amazing as the Ballad of Gregorio Cortez, or as I found it to be. So please let me know in the comments below if you've seen the Ballad of Gregorio Cortez. I feel as though I've said that title about 20 times, so it should be imprinted in your brain. The next time you're on the Criterion site, which one you should pick up. I haven't done a very good job describing how amazing this film is. It's absolutely wonderful. So even if you don't know the history, even if you're not Latino and you don't recognise the importance of the story and the culture, or the importance of this film actually in Latino film history, it still works as a fantastic chase film. It plays about with flashbacks and really well. It's shot beautifully. It's acted to perfection by a load of actors with faces that just drip with character. Obviously Edward James Olmos' face is one of those faces that just kind of drips with character and experience. It's an absolute joy, and I highly recommend picking it up, or if you can, if you're a member of the Criterion channel, streaming it and watching it, or picking it up on Blu-ray because the print's really nice. Again, that's actually a restoration that they did in 2016. It's a phenomenal film, and I urge you to check it out if you haven't already. So thanks very much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed this video, and you'll join me for more random reviews. This is Solitude Ronan saying farewell and stay safe.